So you wanna be a picture book writer, then you gotta write picture books. And you're gonna need a bucket load of bright ideas for titles, plots, and hooks. If you're partial to prose or you're raring to rhyme, then repeat after me, it's a challenge, but I'm gonna tackle each story 1 month at a time with 12 by 12.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 12 by 12 Picture Book Podcast. I'm Julie Hedlund, published picture book author and founder of the 12 by 12 Picture Book Writing Challenge. And today I am here with Lee Wind. If you've been around the SCBWI community for any period of time, you know that Lee is sort of famous in those circles. And certainly that's how we met initially. You used to be one of the official FCBWI bloggers, and I remember seeing you at the conferences, sort of like roaming around. And I have a little more appreciation for that now that I have a podcast because I just got back from the Bologna Children's Book Fair a week or so ago, and that's what I was doing, was running around with microphones, trying to talk to people and trying to help people who aren't there, get a sense of what it's like to be there. But I remember reading all of those posts and just being so grateful for you guys that you had somebody sitting in almost every session, and it was just fabulous. But in terms your official bio, you write the books that you say would have changed your life as a young gay Jewish kid. So social justice inspired picture books, nonfiction about queer history, and gay teen action adventure romance novels, which really is fun. And this is something we're definitely going to talk more about today. To help go on the offense against book banning, you co-created the national campaign, We Are Stronger Than Censorship, which buys and donates 2 books to offset every one book challenge. Wow. I can't wait to dig into that more. You're also the chief content officer of the Independent Book Publishers Association, overseeing the publishing, education, and book marketing programs for the nonprofit's 3,500 members. And all of this and a lot more is on your website at leewin.org, which we will share in the show notes. So welcome, Lee.
Thanks so much, Julie. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so I want to start off with one of the reasons I contacted you. You're always doing all these amazing things. But when I reached out to you, it was in response to an article that came out in the school library journal. And the title of that article is Are LGBTQIA plus voices being pushed out of Kidlit? And the timing of me coming across that article was interesting because just a couple of days prior to that, somebody had posted in 12 by 12 saying that there were fewer diverse books getting acquired and so on. And I came in and said, no, I think there are more books getting banned, but I don't, or at least I hope it hasn't reached like the acquisition level or the publication level. And then that article came out and I shared it saying, well, I guess I'm very unfortunately being proven wrong because you and a few other agents and queer authors were talking about this very thing, that publishers seem to be pulling back on acquiring books with LGBTQIA characters and content, and even from creators. So can you talk about what you're seeing on the ground, because you're really active in this space, and how it's been feeling for you and for others in the community?
Yeah, thanks. So book banning is generally not covered super helpfully by our industry. When our industry generally talks about book banning, we're sort of adopting the language of our oppressors, right? We're getting into debates about like, oh, well, is the content appropriate for children? And what we're missing in that is that a this is not like a parent saying, I don't think this is a book that my kid is ready for. That's not what this is. This is a very large, organized campaign to make teachers and librarians afraid to bring in any books of diversity. And they're targeting queer stories and Black stories in history, but that's just the beginning. And in fact, as we're recording this, there is a national book banning bill that is advancing in Congress. And I hope they don't vote for it because it's a terrible slippery slope. And we've seen it in other realms. Like, if they're allowed to call two men walking down the street, just a city scene with two guys, one with his arm around the other, if they're allowed to call that pornography, then, the argument that they have is that, well, we don't want pornography in our schools. There's no pornography in the schools. It's just like they're warping it because like ultimately we're going to end up with only books about like straight white rich people. And, no offense to fabulous straight white rich people that are allies, but honestly, like that's not the world we live in. And as the global majority becomes more of the national majority in the US, there's this sort of like extinction burst of privilege and patriarchy and white supremacy that we're really battling against. And so what's happened with all the book banning, with this incredible increase in the number of orchestrated book bans where they're banning 800 books at a time, it's created this chilling effect, and that is impacting how many books and which books librarians and teachers are willing to bring in. And this is actually where I have this cool synergy between my day job, where I work for this nonprofit association called the Independent Book Publishers Association, and my author job, because I have access to talking to all these mission-driven independent publishers. And some of them are telling me that their sales to schools and libraries are down 50%. So if the sales of the books that have diverse characters and diverse themes in it if the sales are so low, that has to impact acquisitions. It has to impact what the advances are. And this is where it becomes really important. And I think that the members of 12 by 12 really need to know this, is that there aren't just 5 corporations publishing books in the US. Yes, you walk into any bookstore, 4 out of 5 books are going to be from those 5 major publishers. But the other 20%, that 5th book, is from one of thousands of independent publishers. And that's actually really exciting because mission-driven independent publishing is not necessarily backing down. Now, maybe because of the financials, they can't acquire as many books, they can't pay as large advances. But my experience, I have my 9th book is coming out in May, and it's a YA novel, but I have 4 picture books out, and they're all with different companies. They're all with different small, not even that small, but like different independent presses. And I'm really proud of those books. They're beautiful. And I've had really wonderful experiences where I've been much more involved than I think I would have had the opportunity to be had I been at a corporate publisher. So I think that there's, a lot of hope here too. But I think, yeah, it is a hard moment. And definitely I'm hearing it from my agent. We're seeing it just in terms of it's supposed to get, well, I don't know if it's supposed to get easier, but it shouldn't feel harder once you are published and
Right.
and have a bunch of books out. It does feel like it's a harder challenge, right? And it's like, and then there's that challenge, that there's that thing too, like, well, then you have to still submit it. You have to let people be champions. My agent said to me years before she was my agent, we were doing an interview about her perspective on diverse books and diverse creators. And she said, if you have a story to tell and you tell it from the heart, you will find your champions. And I thought that was incredibly powerful. And I made a joke about how if I had that on a t-shirt, I'd wear it. And then like a week later in the mail, she sent me a t-shirt. So I often wear that
This
t-shirt.
agent.
Marietta Zacher from
Okay.
Galt Zacher.
Marietta, that's amazing.
She is amazing. And then years later, she became my agent. And I was like, oh, well, that was meant to be.
Right.
And it's just, you have to give people the opportunity to be your champions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just taking what you said about small and independent publishers for a second. So that's one thing that when you go to Bologna and you see all of the booths from different publishers, it's really interesting to see the difference between those small, medium, independent publishers and what they do there versus the big five, right? And this is not to say that either that the big five are bad or whatever, but they have these giant booths that cover like one whole aisle. But by and large, they display the books that are on their front list and or up and coming. And I'm sure they have catalogs that have their backlist and so on. So for those who don't know, the Bologna Book Fair is the big rights fair where they're trying to buy and sell rights across markets. But the independent booths, like for instance, my last book, Song After Song, The Musical Life of Julie Andrews, was published by Little B, which by the way also publishes a lot of LGBTQIA plus books, and they're very passionate about doing so. And that came out 2 years ago, and they have it prominently displayed in their whole backlist, right? So I think that independent publishers really can, yes, you might not get as big of an advance, and maybe they don't have the same kind of distribution that the big five do, but it seems to me, and from talking to others who have published with smaller, medium-sized books, that they really do stand behind them and want them to do well, and not just in the season that they come out.
That's a great point. And also something that is really interesting that I didn't know until I was at this job was that actually a lot of those 4 out of the 5 big corporate publishers distribute independent publishers.
That's
And
right.
and they rely financially on selling books from those smaller publishers. So it's not as black and white a decision. It's
Correct.
not like,
That's right.
oh, it's a little more nuanced, but it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. So Little B, for instance, distributes through Simon and Schuster,
Great example.
So one of the things in that SLJ article that you said was that you had queer friends who have had manuscripts rejected with queer content. And I'm wondering, is it just on an anecdotal basis? Do you feel like it's more extreme now? And have you had that experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, they're never going to come out and say, oh, well, sorry, we can't do this because it's queer and we don't want so many queer things on our list. But it definitely seems harder. I definitely have projects that have gone out on offer. Hey, this is actually a great tip. Leslie and Newman, who's a friend of mine, she said to me about don't call it submitting, call it offering, because there's that power differential. She was like, I don't want to submit to anybody. I will offer them the opportunity to publish this book with me in a partnership, but I'm not going to submit to anybody. And I was like, I have changed my language. I'm never going on submission again.
Amazing. I feel like that is amazing. It's almost the same shift that I felt when I switched from aspiring author to pre-published.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah. Right. So the school and library market, I think people maybe because we think about trade books and so we think about bookstores, but for children's publishing, the biggest, by far the largest market is school and libraries. So that what you said where, librarians and schools are afraid to bring in books that may get challenged, may even cost them their jobs and so on. It's just terrible, and that's why that market is contracting. And you can see why that would then mean that the publishers would be worried that, their whole job is to sell books. and they have to put together those profit and loss statements. What do you think can be done about that in terms of showing demand, showing support, getting not just the books that are banned, but just all of the diverse books that we love and want kids to have access to?
Yeah, I mean, it's beyond just the books that are banned, right? Because again, it's not about the content of the books.
Right.
That's the false narrative. What's going on is that we need to be supportive of all books with diversity and really think about the idea of being an ally. I just read somewhere yesterday, like ally is a verb. Like,
Mm.
if you're a silent ally, you're not an ally, you're a bystander. So how can you actually be an ally? And I think part of that is getting the books, whether you're buying them from an indie bookstore or online, if you're ordering them from your local library, talking them up when someone says, what's a book that's come out recently? You are allowed I present as white, right? I mean, I'm Jewish, and I think in other eras, I would not be considered white. But in America right now, 2026, I have this privilege of walking through the world as this white middle-aged guy who's cisgender, and there's a ton of privilege that comes with that. So I really try hard, like, what are the books that I'm reading and what are the books that I'm talking about and how am I actually being an ally to other communities? Because, like, I'm gay and I was closeted for a very long time, for 14 years, from 11 to 25. And I've kind of figured out on my journey that my job is to be an ally to everybody else, like to everybody else in my fabulous rainbow soup, alphabet soup of the LGBTQIA2 plus community, and to women and to people of color and disabled people and indigenous people and to everybody that isn't getting an opportunity to be their authentic selves and have the best opportunities to succeed. And, that's why it's like, I'm really excited to talk up independent publishers because a lot of times they're mission driven and it isn't just about how much money are they going to make. It's about how important are the books they're putting out in the world. And that feels really resonant because I have a day job and I feel like I wish I'd known this earlier, right? Like I thought, oh, I'm going to get an agent and then we're going to sell books and I won't need a day job and books will be my day job. It does happen to some people, but it's sort of like looking at the people that win the lottery and being like, that's my game plan. I mean, I hope it happens for y'all. That would be amazing. But truly, it's not a realistic goal. I mean, it's a dream and I love it. It's a fabulous dream. I certainly have it too. But recognizing that I need a day job. And if I can find a day job that has some synergy with my author career, then that feels like the ideal situation.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm doing my day job right now.
Right. Yeah.
Talking to you, like 12 by 12 and Picture Book Summit and those things are the day job. And I feel very, very lucky that they are obviously so picture book and writing adjacent. Not
You
even
found good
adjacent.
synergy. You
Yes,
found
I've
good
got really
synergy.
good. I've got about the closest synergy. So I know as creators, we're concerned about the books that will get written or won't get written, and the books that will sell and the books that won't sell and the books that get banned. One thing that I worry about, and I know you do too, is that in all of these conversations, it can be easy to forget that on the other side of that book is a child
Mm.
who needs it. And a few years ago, back when I was trying to strike up some kind of following on TikTok, I did a video during Banned Books Week. And one of the things that really struck me and that I talked about was that the problem with these book challenges and these book bans, like you said, it isn't that they're saying this book is bad or the content in this book is bad. What they're really saying to kids who identify in this way is that you're bad. That's the
Mhm.
message ultimately that I think it's very possible for these kids to receive because
Right.
when
You don't, you even a representation of you
of
or your
you
history doesn't belong in this environment.
correct, it's wrong, right? And you're not normal. And as an adult, that's incredibly difficult. But for children, it's even worse. So when I hear, for instance, that an independent publisher who's very mission driven has their school and library sales down like 50%, that really scares me, not only from like the career perspective, but also from the kid perspective, because that means there are fewer of these books getting to kids. Do you know of any initiatives that are working that angle of it? I sit here and I think, how do you circumvent a school library to make sure that kids, or a public library, when you know that their parents aren't going to be giving them the books, and if they're not then available at school or at the public library, then what? You know?
Yeah, it becomes sort of like this book apartheid, right? Like only certain books make it through to certain communities. There are wonderful organizations, and also we shouldn't paint it with too broad a brush. There are so many librarians and teachers that are really fighting hard to represent all the kids in their classrooms and all the kids in their communities, and they are doing the good work. It's funny, we have such a negativity bias as humans. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
like, okay, so one of my books, No Way They Were Gay, which is nonfiction for ages 11 and up, published by Lerner, that book has been challenged and banned like a dozen times. That book is also in thousands of libraries.
Hmm.
And what do I spend my mental time on? I obsess about the 12 times that it's been challenged or banned, and not thinking about like how, like the incredible like impact it has just by being in all these middle school and high school libraries. So it's like we have to kind of be careful about like how we think about it. But there are organizations like We Need Diverse Books. There are nonprofit programs like, so the thing that I started, We Are Stronger Than Censorship. With the books that we buy, we've purchased 5,000 books so far to buy from publishers and donate to different organizations around the country that are just delivering the books directly into the hands of young people. And that program is buying those books from different independent publishers that are mission driven. And so trying to look at it from lots of different ways, that, getting involved in your local school board elections. If you have kids in the school, I mean, honestly, there's so many people that don't have kids in the school that are involved in this
I was going to
conflict
say,
as well.
even if you don't, like my kids are out of public school now, they're both off in college, but I spoke at a school board meeting and would do it again.
Good for you. Yeah. Like just letting your voice be heard, because if all of us that believe in this idea of a pluralistic community, and that books help you with empathy, and that empathy is a good thing, if we're all quiet and we let the loud jerks just, have their way, that's just being bystanders, and that's letting terrible things happen. So if we all speak up in the ways that we feel comfortable, in the ways that we can, I think that really can help. And there are some really cool things. Boyd's Mills, which used to be called Highlights, they have scholarships for different marginalized communities to go and do programs there, so they can advance on their individual journeys to getting published and to getting the books out. And just being supportive, being a friend. I mean, you having me on this podcast to talk about like my books, that's also being an ally. And thank you.
You're very welcome. I love your books. Okay, I have to say that when I was looking at your website in preparation for this interview, I was like, oh my gosh, you wrote Banana Menorah? I had no idea. I read that book. I loved it. And for some reason, you know how sometimes you're in the bookstore and you just grab something and then you read it, and it just didn't register that you were the author until I saw that. And then I got thinking, gosh, there was like a little bit of a banana theme going on recently, because then there was also the book, If You Call a Gorilla on a Banana Phone or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, very clever. And before we started recording, I told you that Red and Green and Blue and White is one of my all-time favorite picture books. And
Thank you.
I tell right behind you, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see right behind Lee is the picture book Like That, Eleanor, So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was a double dipping situation where I had done all this research about Eleanor Roosevelt for No Way They Were Gay, because Eleanor Roosevelt, in addition to being married to FDR, she was in love with this woman whose name was Lorena Hickok. And there are thousands of letters between Lorena and Eleanor. And so doing all the research about Eleanor Roosevelt for that book, I learned about all these amazing ways that Eleanor Roosevelt was an ally to other people and the Black community in particular. She really stood up. And then there was also this like amazing story about how when she got to the White House, she learned that only male reporters were allowed to attend her husband, the president's press conferences. And she was so clever. She decided that rather than fight to have women reporters admitted into the president's press conferences, which would have been kind of aggressive and not really her style, she just was super clever. And she's like, I'm going to have my own press conferences as first lady, and I'm only going to allow women reporters in the room. And it forced all these news outlets to hire women reporters because they didn't want to be left out of this stream of information coming from the White House. Like that level of allyship was so clever and so smart. And so as I was doing this, the nonfiction for readers 11 and up, I just kept thinking, well, there's something about these stories about Eleanor Roosevelt being an ally that are so cool. I wonder if there's something that I could do with that as a picture book, because I love picture books. They're absolutely one of my favorite things to write. They're incredibly hard. I think of them like they're like Rubik's cubes and Fabergé eggs all at the same time, right? There's this.
Oh my God, that is amazing.
There are these incredibly complicated puzzles, but you're not working with a lot of pieces. And ultimately, it needs to be so beautiful and intricate. But you first have to figure out the puzzle.
Wow.
And then when we were raising our daughter, who is now also out of the house, she's off in grad school, there were all these unfair things she saw happening at school, and she would come home and we would talk about it. And it was frustrating because it's like, as a little kid, the world tells you to wait until you're an adult to make any change. And you don't have to wait. Kids can actually do a lot of things on a kid level. On the most basic level, if something unfair happens to somebody else, you can go and be kind to that person. You can be friends to that person. And in a lot of ways, the definition of ally for a little kid can be being a friend. And I loved that. And so I had this idea of combining a little kid today who is maybe named after Eleanor Roosevelt, seeing unfair things happening in her school, and then being inspired by the stories her two dads, that was important to me. I really wanted some books with two dads, because when my kid was growing up, she has two dads. My husband and I are married, and we raised her from birth. And like, I want more representation of families like mine. And that doesn't preclude families that are, formed differently, from reading the book. Just like our kid read 1 million books. I read her 1 million books with a mom and a dad and, a dog. We don't have a dog. She doesn't have a mom. It doesn't matter. We were still able to get wonderful, great emotional moments from those books. And likewise, those people that have families like that could read this book with two dads and get wonderful things out of it too. So I combine those elements. And then what I thought would be very resonant with the moment right now would be for the allyship that the child Eleanor stands up for a friend, is that the friend is non-binary. And that really feels like an issue of the moment. Not people being non-binary have existed all around the world, all across time. And as the generations proceed in America right now, more and more kids are identifying outside the gender binary, which is very exciting, but it also is very scary for people that think that this is something brand new and they don't really understand it. And I think the point is, you don't have to understand. You have to be kind and you have to respect. I don't understand people that are super religious, but I can respect them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's just it, right? Like, you do you, I'll do me, and we try not to hurt each other. And if possible, we help each other. It seems like that's simple.
It's
right?
kind of like the idea. I mean, I think that there's a thematic underpinning of pretty much all I do, which is that diversity is a strength. The fact that we are different makes the world more interesting and more fascinating and more wonderful. It's funny, in nature, we're all so quick to be like, oh my gosh, look at how many amazing butterflies there are in the world. And yet when it comes to humans, we're like, no, I only want them all to be like this.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, one of the things that comes up continually when we have these conversations is that we are in a very rough period right now. We will eventually be out of it. That's the hope,
It's
right?
gonna happen too soon.
And I think we have to hold on to that hope. But, it felt like however many years ago, pre-Trump one, that we really were having this kind of golden age of more diversity in picture books, more kids out there feeling represented. And I think it was really starting to make an impact. It hadn't gone far enough, but it was, I felt, a good start. And what do we do also to prepare for that next time? And I guess now I'm talking about the creator side. So, we mentioned, yes, one of the big things you can do is to buy books by LGBTQIA plus authors and request them from your library. And if you are, whether you are identify as queer or straight or whatever, if you have a way into schools, like when my kids were little, I used to do like volunteer mystery reader, where
Mhm.
one of the parents would come in and read a book. And at that time, I was writing, but I didn't have any books published. So I would always just pick a book that I liked and bring it in. And, we can do that too. I mean, I'm not a mystery reader anymore because I don't have kids in school, but anytime you have opportunities like that to share your book or multiple books, choose one that has some element of diversity and share it, because maybe we're the ones who are going to be able to get those gigs a little more easily right now. So I think that's one thing we can do. I think also social media, being out there, sharing, creating reels, posting about books and reviewing books and all of that
Not
is,
self-censoring ourselves when we're creating.
well, that's just it, right? So there's all that we can do to be allies and to support the books and that are out there. But what about the pre-published creators who may be feeling discouraged? You mentioned Boyd's Mills has programs. 12 by 12 has a scholarship program. Applications open in November. But like beyond that, what within our communities, like what can we do to keep them going, have them live to fight another day kind of thing?
I think recognizing that, we're not in competition with each other. Like,
Mm,
when if somebody reads your beautiful book, Julie, then they're gonna want the next beautiful book, and maybe that's my book, and
right.
maybe it's not, and maybe it's somebody else's book, and it's okay. We're so raised in this culture of competitiveness, and that this sort of zero-sum game where it's like, "Oh, well, if somebody likes your book, it's taking something away from me." It's not. We can be a kinder, more gracious community, and I think supporting each other and sharing opportunities and mentorships. SCBWI also has a lot of grant opportunities for pre-published authors. Submitting your work, recognizing that you don't have to have an editor that matches up with your exact flavor of diversity, or an agent. Like, it doesn't, we can be champions for other kinds of work beyond just ourselves. And then also think about the cast of characters that you're writing, that you're creating. They should be diverse. I mean, if you look at classrooms today, in most schools, they are not just a monolith of one kind of student. And pushing back when, if an illustration, can you ask? I mean, oftentimes you don't get a choice, but sometimes they'll say, do you have an illustrator in mind? So say if it's your preference, if you think it's important, like I have a picture book that's under contract right now, hasn't gotten announced yet, but like it was really important to me that the illustrator is also queer. It's a very queer story. And that was important. When I had Love of the Happy and Peach published, it's inspired by a piece of history, of queer history from pre-unified China. And I said to the publisher, look, I can vouch for the queer history here, but we need an illustrator with Chinese heritage or experience with the art, because there's no way this book will be as beautiful and as successful as it could be if we don't have an artist that has the heritage to ground it in the reality of that community and that culture. I was talking with a friend and she was talking about her picture book and she's like, yeah, I didn't imagine that my main character, who I knew was going to be an African-American child, would be the only person of color in the entire picture book. And I was like, oh, well, I actually think that would have been really helpful feedback to share when you get to see the sketches. You could be like, hey, is it possible? Sometimes they'll ask, they'll be like, what's important to you? And with like that Eleanor, I said, it's really important that it's a diverse classroom.
Right.
That there's a lot. And the illustrator, Kelly Mangan, did an amazing job. There's a kid with a cochlear implant. There's a child that wears a veil. There's so many indicators of diversity in the book. And yet it's not about that. So
Right.
I love that.
Right. I had that exact experience with song after song. So most of the book takes place in Julie's childhood, which is World War II, Britain, London, right? And so historically, there's not a lot of opportunities for diversity in her life. But at the end, there's a montage of, where she went from, and it talks about her on stage and then on the page, which is when she started writing books for children. And then at the end, it's like her voice wrapped around the world like a hug. So the last spread is more modern. It's showing Julie, is she signing books for kids and then in a room. And that was where I said, and I was nervous about doing it because, you're already like, if it's nonfiction, sometimes you have to give feedback like, oh, the hair color, this or whatever. And so I'd done that a few times, but I said, I really think in these last couple of spreads, it's an opportunity to show some more diverse kids because now we're in the modern world. And
What a beautiful way of pitching it to them. That's great.
right. And because there was only one and I just was thinking, here is an opportunity to bring us to where she is today, which is in this world in the US where there are a lot of different kinds of kids. And I'm sure she meets them in the work that she does. So they were like, absolutely, and came back.
And how wonderful, because you were an ally, right? You said something about it. And then, because they may have been afraid, they may have been like, oh, I don't know if Julie would want. I mean, people make silly assumptions all the time, right? Like, oh, Julie has blonde hair and is white skin. Maybe she wouldn't want more diversity in the book. But by you saying it and saying it so beautifully, like, hey, I think there's an opportunity here in these spreads to show more diverse kids. Like the most perfect way of approaching it. I love that.
Right. And so I think that's one thing about allyship is you do have to be brave sometimes. Sometimes you have to step outside your comfort zone because, maybe we're so excited to be published at all that we don't want to be a bother. We don't want to say anything. And so I think for me, one thing is always keeping the kids at the back of my mind. And that it as much as when I'm having my pity parties over rejections or even a celebration of a good thing happening, that it's really ultimately not about me, right? And that's true for the fact that it's also my responsibility as a member of this community to lift other people because it's not just about me. So I am going to share in the show notes the organization Stronger Than Censorship, right? You've also been doing, I know, quite a bit of work with Authors Against Book Bans, and they have a big campaign right now on the bill that you mentioned that's headed through. I think it's a House bill at this point.
Yes.
So we'll put all that in there so people can call their representatives. For somebody who hates making phone calls, I've done it like almost every day since the inauguration, and it's really not that hard. If you use 5 calls, it's an app. They give you a script. They give you the phone number. You just click it, and then the script is up there, and you can just read it. And it's really easy, and it's really important.
Oh, and just for the people watching, I wanted to explain about my shirt.
Oh,
So
yes.
so my shirt says strong like a reader, and the O of strong is a do not enter sign that's opening up. The center bar, the center white bar is opening up to reveal it's actually a book being read. And that's part of the logo for We Are Stronger Than Censorship. So we have all these different versions of strong like an author, strong like a writer, strong like a poet, strong like a memoirist. We have like 10 or 11 designs.
I'm going to have to get one.
Yeah, and every purchase of a shirt includes a donation of $16 so we can buy and donate 2 books to offset 1 book challenge. We even have stickers, which is really fun. I know, the stickers
We
are
all
really
love
cool.
swag, right?
Yeah. So that, just to explain, like that's why I was wearing the shirt, because it relates to We Are Stronger Than Censorship. So yeah, and that'll be great for people to
Okay.
access in
Awesome.
the show notes.
Well, let's switch gears quickly toward the end and talk about some happy things. You said so beautifully that writing a picture book is like a Rubik's Cube and a Fabergé egg combined. And yet, you also said that it's your favorite thing to write. Why? And do you have a few quick tips, trade tips, or words to the wise that you could give us about writing picture books?
Sure. It's just magical, right? Like there's something, and then seeing it brought to life, because it's like, I feel like there's 4 elements to a picture book. There's the story and the words. Those are different. Those are different
Yes.
things, right? Like the story is sort of like the billboard, the construction on the highway, that like the metal, the wood framing, that's the story. Then the words are the skim of art or an ad or whatever on the front of it. So that's like the author's realm, right? You got the story, you got the words and the punctuation and the spaces and all that great stuff, all the amazing tools that we have as authors. Then there's the illustrator, and they have 2 things. They have the character and settings, like they decide what everything looks like and who these characters visually appear to be. And then they're doing the illustrations of the different moments in the story. They're choosing those moments and they're bringing them to life. And so that's the magic that happens between those 2 when they come together is so exciting. And to something that like was in my head, seeing it actually as a picture book is thrilling. And also the page turns, I forgot to say, those are amazing. Make sure your page turns are paying off. I thought writing picture books was going to be the easiest kind of kidlit writing. And it's actually the hardest. You're like, oh, it's 500 words. How hard could it be? But it's like, oh my gosh, choosing the right words and having each word do all this lifting. I found that there's this trick you can do with a single sheet of paper where if you fold it multiple times, you'll end up with 32 rectangles. They're kind of tall and narrow. And what I do with all my manuscripts is I then take little sticky notes and I figure out like what is on this spread and what is my page turn and how am I making sure that I don't have 3 scenes in a row with the kid in the bathtub talking to the dad or whatever. Like you want to make sure that there's something for the illustrator to do that's different on each spread so it visually is interesting. So for me, that's the biggest tip. And also reading it out loud, because this book is going to be read out loud a gazillion times. And so when you actually figure out like how many words end up on each page, like you're going to quickly figure out, oh, that's too many words on this page.
Right.
And it is a process of rewriting, and it is kind of amazing when it clicks and you feel like, oh, I solved it. And then you're like, oh, I only solved one side of the Rubik's Cube.
Exactly it. And as soon as you turn that something else to go with that, it's going to change that side again. And
Absolutely. It's like I've been trying to figure out the title of a new picture book manuscript I've been working on, and every day I change it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not cooked yet, right? It's not done. I need to get to where I have 3 days in a row of reading it and I have no more changes before I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to give it to my critique group, or now it's ready to go to my agent if it's at that stage. So that's my personal rule, like 3 days, no changes.
Wow. Yeah, I wish I had that problem. I usually come up with titles first, and then I get overwhelmed because it's like, oh, what's the story going to be? I'll come up with this amazing title or something that I'm really excited about, that has some kind of concept. But, everybody's process is different, and
every book seems different too,
yes,
Julie,
for
don't you think?
sure.
Like, I feel like
Absolutely.
some books blow out and some books are like,
Well, thank you so much. Now I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every guest, which is a lot of fun, which is, what picture book do you wish you had written and why?
well, I don't want to take anything away from the creators of this book because it's fabulous, but I do think that Entango Makes Three is probably my answer to this question, by Justin Richardson and Peter Parnell, illustrated by Henry Cole. It's based on it is a true story about two male penguins that sort of became a couple. And then there was a little penguin egg that needed parenting. And the zookeeper gave the egg to these penguins and they did everything right. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it is just absolutely
It's so
adorable.
beautiful.
They end up being the first two dad penguin family in the New York City Zoo. And it's just absolutely adorable and sweet. And I love that it's based on a true story. I love that the two men that wrote it are a couple. There was just so much I loved about it. And when our daughter was in kindergarten, we'd started at a new school and we bought a copy of that book for all the families in her class because it was like, well, we were the first two dad family at that school. And having this book, even though it was about penguins, was so helpful to be like, this is just another kind of way of being a family. And it's a book that has so much meaning for me. And yeah, it's beautiful.
And it happens to be one of the most banned books every year.
That
So
too.
it's not
Yeah.
that that's a good thing, but it definitely comes back around to the mission of getting books out there to kids and how important they are. I love that book. I mean, come on,
It's penguins.
it's penguins and they raise this little baby penguin.
It's about penguins and love. Like, I
Right.
mean, really.
I know. You have to laugh so you don't cry, right?
Keep writing and
Keep writing and trust that one day the market will be ready to rise to meet your stories. And I'm forever changed by we are offering our stories for
Leslie Newman, she's
publication.
brilliant.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lee. This was just a blast. I'll ask you one more question. This episode will air right at the beginning of Pride Month. So what do you have planned for Pride Month, just for celebrations, whether literacy based or not?
Oh, wow. Well, I have a book, I have a YA novel coming out at the end of May. So I'm going to be celebrating that in June. It's called A Different Kind of Enemy. It's not a picture book. But I will keep writing picture books and keep offering them out, giving them to my agent, just getting them out on offer. And it's kind of funny. Having a month is sort of a weird thing because it's like, I'm actually queer all the other months of the year too.
I know.
But it is a great excuse to be talking up other books. And like, I just read a really fabulous YA novel by Dahlia Adler called Going Bi-Coastal about a bi main character, and I'm not bi, but it was fabulous and it was really great, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. So it's like I'll be talking up books that have queer content, and I hope your listeners do too.
Yes, we will. Let's do it, folks. Read, share, review, request, all of the things. Thank you so much, Lee. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Julie. It was a joy.
Together, so never you fear. It's a handy little way to help you kick into gear. You're amazing.